Welcome to the Snow Shark Show. I'm CJ Baumgartner. That is Ian Rivers. Ian, it's a great day to be a snow shark. How you feeling?
Yeah, I love the rebrand, man. It's super fun. It's awesome. Obviously, there's a lot of history behind the Beaver name, but we're turning a corner. We're ready to go
We're
as
ready to change with the times.
Snow Sharks. Yeah, it's super fun, super exciting. We
Yeah,
come
we
out
haven't
with
worked on the branding stuff yet. If you look up top, but
yeah,
don't worry, it's coming. It's coming.
yeah,
We,
right.
we just want to be ready. So we'll get all this stuff changed. The Snow Shark Show is coming, as obviously Bemidji State announced yesterday that they are changing to be the Snow Sharks, and we just wanted to make sure that we are doing an emergency podcast based off that. Ian, just overall, I think it's a great name.
Yeah, yeah. We needed a little bit of a laugh yesterday because today brought with some news that obviously most of us had in the back of our minds, but it was confirmed today. So we'll touch
For
on
those
that.
who don't know, by the way,
Yeah.
before we get into it, yeah, the Snow Sharks is it's an April Fool's Day joke from I can't remember if it was from the alumni association or if it was from the school proper, but either way, I think they
It
both
was
kind of were
both.
both
It,
were
it
in
seemed
on
like
it.
both. Yeah, both made videos about it. So I think mostly the Alumni Foundation, but
I think
the
they were
school
kind
was
of
definitely in on it.
yeah, I think they were ready to go. The AD Brit had something out talking about the rebrand and how exciting it'll be, and yeah, all on board. Somebody said in the comments of one of the post, because I think it was Dave Schwartz who does communication stuff for the Wild, put something out that said, honestly, I know he's like, I know this is a joke, but honestly, it looks pretty good. And somebody said, if you change the snow shark and have a picture of a muskie on the logo, like name the professional women's hockey league, that's their mascot, like make them the Muskies. And I was like, cook, like that's, if Bemidji State was going to rebrand anything, Snow Sharks would have been it, and you could have had like a instead of a snow shark, you have like a muskie in there or something like that. That'd be kind of fun. So there was before we get into the depressing stuff, we're trying to keep things light here. In amateur baseball, there was a team located in Park Rapids, which is about like 40 minutes south of Bemidji, 50 minutes south of Bemidji on Highway 71. And their town ball name was the E-Sox. And you think like that's weird. Like, what the heck is an E-Sock? Well, it's a muskie, I think. It's a northern, one of the two. And I was like, because at first I'm like, what the heck is that? That's dumb. And then somebody said it, and I was like, actually, that's really clever. So if they want to change it to the Snow Sharks and make it like a muskie or something, make it look ferocious, I could get on board with that. So,
Sure.
Brit, the Alumni Association, whoever's listening, you guys are onto something here. So if there ever is a rebrand in the future, just so you know, that is a name that you can keep on the table. That's not an April Fool's Day joke. Good job, everyone, on that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right,
Yeah.
Ian, you ready to
Let's
talk about this?
rip the Band-Aid off, man. It's Eric Pohlkamp. Eric Pohlkamp, stud freshman, defenseman, has officially now entered his name into the transfer portal. It's something that you feared was going to happen. It's a big loss. It is a really big loss. He was fourth on the team in points. He had 24 points as a freshman, a lot of which came. It felt like he had 5 or 6 goals down the stretch of this season that were just absolutely massive. He had one in the semifinal to get the Beavers rolling against Lake Superior State. Yeah, fourth highest score on the team. That's going to be a tough
Just the
pill to
guy who looked
swallow.
like an NHLer, really.
Yeah, I mean, he's a Sharks draft pick. And I think, that might have something to do with why he's entering his name in the transfer portal. I don't know anything for sure. I have not talked to Eric myself. I just have some people that have potentially heard from other people that might have heard from somebody else. So it may not have been completely up to Eric in this. But I'm not going to
Source Ian can
speculate.
feel it in his bones.
Right. I mean, dude, trust me, is kind of the source. But yeah, it sucks. It really does, because you figure he's getting a lot of time here. Time on ice was always going to be the number one thing that was going to keep him here if it was anything. And if he was going to leave, it's going to be opportunity to play against better teams, better players more consistently. Obviously, we don't think the CCHA is going to have as down of a year as it did this year, but that definitely did not help the public perception that San Jose might have had of this great league, of this esteemed league. Yeah, and the big thing that really sucks is we only had like 2 right shot defensemen on the team, and he was one of them. And so now you've got one of your best defensemen leaving, and pair that with Kyle Loft, who's a fifth-year senior that's graduating, and that's quite a bit of defensive prowess that's leaving offensively and defensively. I mean, both first-team All CCHA players. Eric didn't win Rookie of the Year, but he probably should have. I know Isaac Gordon was really good for Michigan Tech, but I think he was snubbed just like Roed was the year before. Yeah, I don't have a ton to say about it other than it's going to be a big blow offensively. And I'll touch a little bit more on why maybe we should pump the brakes on the panic. And you know, obviously there's still time. The transfer portal's open. Now you're going to look for people to fill that hole. I'm looking at Josh Singer from NMU as one of my top targets. I don't know how much interest he would have in coming in, but he is a right shot defenseman. He was second team All CCHA this year. NMU is going through their own kind of mass exodus this year, kind of like what Bemidji State women's hockey was dealing with at the end of last season. And that's just kind of the nature of the transfer portal. But this is only the second player that BSU's had enter this year. The other one, of course, being Jakub Lewandowski, the Polish native who actually only played in 9 games for the Beavers this year, recording 2 points. I know that the assist was very nice. I did compliment him for that, but just a log jam in the forward room. And even, you know, with Leighton Roed leaving, and spoiler alert, we'll get to that in a minute, but it's just a log jam in that forward room, especially with how much young talent this team brought in. So Lewandowski, instead of spending his senior season riding the pine, he's going to try to find some time elsewhere, which, you know, that's one that doesn't hurt as much and is a little bit more understandable. The Pohlkamp one, that one's going to sting.
That one's going to sting. And, you know, I mentioned it earlier. That guy's an NHLer, and that's a guy who I remember you talked about that goal against Lake State. And that's just one where, you know, just ripped it. And the way he was able to put that in there, I'd watched some good BSU hockey teams throughout the years, and you just hadn't seen a guy who could come in and make plays like that consistently show up all the time. And I put this out here on Twitter earlier today is just one of the most talented players Bemidji State has had in a very long time. And you kind of knew when he was having the season he wants that it could be on borrowed time with the way the transfer portal works, and that there was a chance that he was going to take that next step. And it just stings to see that happen. Now, whether it's, you know, he wanted to leave or, you know, the Sharks are pushing him or it was kind of 50-50 or whatever, I don't know. That's not the important part, but it just stings to lose him because of the way that this team ended. You felt like if they could have brought the band back together, there's no reason that they wouldn't have been able to be right back in the same spot, hosting the Mason Cup championship game and having a chance to knock on the door of the NCAA tournament. It just stinks that the after the first goal of that Mason Cup championship game, it feels like there hasn't been a positive thing to come out of the hockey program, or at least a good enough headlines to outweigh just how everybody's feeling right now. It just stings. It stings. It stinks. It sucks. Whatever you want to say, it's not great. And it, you know, Pohlkamp was a guy who was going to be really good, and he will still be really good wherever he goes. And I know that some people have thrown it out on Twitter, a couple different schools. I can't remember who put it out there on Twitter, but right, you know, it was kind of somewhere in the NCHC or something like that, was that it's been thrown out there by a couple different college hockey insider people.
Yeah, there's a couple schools in the NCHC. Jared, I know, tweeted that have been battling for him. I don't know anything officially yet about who those two teams are,
Right.
or at least not that I'm allowed to say if I do know it. So we'll keep that kind of on the down low. But yeah, he's probably going to end up somewhere close, and it just that's kind of a sucky part about it, where it's, you know, if you got to face him next year, especially, it's not going to be fun because, you know, he's a damn good player, and he would have helped this team. I mean, this was a team that's following that Mason Cup championship game. You're looking at it, and you're like, wow, we got a lot of good guys coming back. You know, we might have a shot again to run this back, and it might be pretty easy for this team to do so. And now over the last week, you've lost some key players, some positively, some negatively, but yeah, I mean, that's really all I have to say about Eric. You know, it was fun covering him this year. He was a stud freshman, one of the most fun we've ever seen. Obviously, Leighton just came in last year and did the same type of thing. Obviously, he's a forward, so it's a little different. But yeah, Leighton was exciting, and now back-to-back freshmen. So it'll be interesting to see which one of the freshmen comes in and knocks our socks off this next
Right.
season.
It's been a tradition now. So we're gonna have to see how that works out. And one more thing while we're talking about the transfer portal, and I've heard this thrown out there on social media. So tell me if this is an overreaction or if you're buying into this. Somebody kind of threw it out there with the CCHA. Is this just a league where basically the NCHC, the Big Ten, a couple of these other schools, are they just going to treat it as a feeder, find a guy who has a good year and an NHLer, like basically somebody in a Pohlkamp situation? Are they just going to, is this the pessimistic view is this just going to be a feeder conference for some of these other schools that are bigger across the country?
I'm going to sell that for now. I think we're too early into the process of the new era of the transfer portal, kind of since COVID has started, where I want to see what happens next off season when there's no more grad transfers or fifth-year transfers that can,
The COVID year will be huge.
the COVID year transfers. I want to see that before I start making any huge assumptions. I think it's going to hurt the small conferences like the CCHA, Atlantic Hockey, for guys of Pohlkamp's stature, right? NHL draft picks coming in. They have a great year, and now maybe they're NHL. If that's true, like maybe now those NHL teams want them. Yeah, you did good. I want you to see you move somewhere else that you can get more experience against better players. Maybe that's the case. With other guys, like with Leighton Roed, we were kind of fearing the same thing. Like, man, he had a fantastic freshman season. What if, he wants to go somewhere else to bet on himself to say, look, I did it in the CCHA. Now I can do it in NCHC or the Big Ten and bet on himself to go do it in a bigger league. I think those guys are more apt to stay around than a guy like maybe a Pohlkamp who is already an NHL draft pick. It's hard to say. I think we're still too early into this. I do want to see, they talked about this trickle down effect where it's kind of going to be rotational, right? Yeah, good players from our league are going to go and try to bet on themselves, and they're going to get scooped by Big Ten and NCHC and Hockey East teams. But then again, players from those teams are going to be upset because everybody that gets to UND and Minnesota and Michigan thinks they have top 6 forward potential, top 4 defenseman potential. And if they don't get that right away, and if they don't see a path to that right away, maybe they get frustrated, and now an ultra-talented player is going to a smaller league where they can be the guy. So there will be some of that. It's really hard to say how it's going to be right now because I think that the smaller leagues are benefiting a little bit from guys like Jimmy Snuggerud just announced he would come back to Minnesota this season or this next season. That takes away a roster spot from another player. Obviously, he's not a fifth-year guy that's coming back, but like last year, the Gophers had a ton of forwards come back. Jackson Nelson, Bryce Brodzinski, Mason Nevers, all of those guys came back, and it really created a logjam in that room. Jackson Panzer, a recruit that just flipped to BSU from North Dakota, wasn't going to get enough time or was going to be told maybe to stay in juniors for another year, I think is the story. He didn't like that. He wanted to get playing time right away. He's coming to Bemidji State. That's a really good recruit that's going to help.
That's a pull.
Yeah, that's a great pull. And a guy that's going to help immediately lift some of this scoring that we're losing from guys this year that are exiting the program. But yeah, I think it's just that's a very long-winded way of saying it's kind of too early for me to tell. The writing on the wall right now is not great. I'm a little bit concerned that maybe these schools, like this is going to be a little bit of the norm. Maybe not as bad as this year that the CCHA was, but some years you might be, we were really lucky to get a second team in the tournament because one team was good enough and then somebody else stole the automatic bid. But I think that we kind of have to wait and see before we truly hit the panic button.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's not a great year, and you kind of go through this every once in a while, especially since the conference is down the way it is. It definitely didn't help teams that, aren't paying attention to some of the minor conferences, or I guess teams that aren't Hockey East, NCHC, Big Ten, and they go, I don't know, you should be getting to the top level. I get that. I think though, overall, that, like you said, it's a little too much to panic, but next year if we run into that same situation. And remember, Bemidji State didn't have correct me if I'm wrong, Ian, they didn't have a player transfer out last year. So
or in. They didn't bring anybody in or yeah. So they
weren't affected by it at all last year.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And it's this year, I mean, the writing on the wall kind of told you that there was going to be movement because of how log jammed the room was, especially in the forwards position.
Mm-hmm.
I think that you kind of have to wait and see too, and this is something we'll in the future and even maybe a little bit later in this episode, is what's going to happen with those fifth-year seniors, the forwards, Joby, Judding, and Martin. It sounds like there's rumors that they might be coming back. I have nothing official that's been posted anywhere, just the rumor mill swirling about.
He's just feeling it in his bones.
But that would lead to more of these guys, like maybe Alexander Lundman, a guy that couldn't get on the ice towards the end of the season. Now he's going to be, I believe, a senior this next year, just like Lewandowski would have been. Maybe he doesn't want to be a rotational fourth line guy and he wants to go if he can play somewhere else and get minutes somewhere else. You might see more of that still to come with some depth pieces, but to only have 2 leave right now, and one of them was a depth forward and the other one is something that a small school like Bemidji is working towards. How do I say this? They're working towards building a culture that means something, and that guys like this might be allowed to stay in the future because they'll be considered a better program. And I guess if we want to transition into something that helps with that narrative, it would be a guy like Roed signing an entry-level contract with the Seattle Kraken. I don't know if you have anything more on the portal, and we do still have something else to touch on in the portal in a little bit, but I want to touch on
let's get right to it.
Yeah. The guys are signing. We have 2 so far with Roed signing with the Seattle Kraken. Of course, this is a bittersweet one, right? This is a positive one. A guy you want to see leave the program early because he's getting a chance to go play in the NHL and betting on himself. I don't blame him at all because, he could come back and he could benefit from having another great year next year. But what if he gets injured?
You already have that. When you have that guarantee you just have to kind of take it. And that's what he did. And that's what Zach Whitecloud did. And if you look, Zach Whitecloud is a contributing player on a Stanley Cup winning team. So that's kind of the blueprint of it.
By the way, I went to the Wild game on Saturday, my first ever Wild game. They were playing the Vegas Golden Knights. I was so excited to get to see Whitecloud play in person, and he was a healthy scratch. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. We watched him skate pregame, but then he never actually was in the game. So that was a little bit sucky. And then, of course, the Wild decided to pull their goaltender in overtime and are now basically eliminated from the playoffs officially. So it's kind of Jover there, but with Leighton, you can't blame him at all for taking the jump that he did. I think he's a very talented player, and I'm grateful that he was able to give us 2 years. I mean, this is what good programs do, CJ. They put people in the show in the NHL. And you got to be able to adapt. And they have brought somebody in from the transfer portal that we'll touch on in a minute to help this. The Jackson Panzer signing and the flip from UND really feels like it kind of softens this blow as well. And then the other guy that went pro was 5th-year senior Carter Jones, signed an ECHL contract with the Norfolk Admirals. So congrats to Carter. He was a great player this year as well. So that's 2. Obviously, Leighton might not get any time with Seattle. We'll see this year. But Whitecloud didn't really get that much time with Vegas early on either. He played in Chicago for a long time in the AHL.
It's more of just getting you in the system this year, and then next year is a full go. I think is typically kind of unless you're just amazing. I think it's kind of just getting you in and getting you acclimated. So then next year you can hit the ground running.
Right. He'll probably see plenty of AHL games. I can't remember who Seattle's AHL affiliate is, but he'll probably play a lot of time there, and then he'll get a game or 2 in the NHL. I'm sure if he doesn't make his debut at the end of the season this year, I think there's 6 games left or something. Probably get it.
They have the Coachella Valley Firebirds.
Yes, that's right.
What a great name.
Yeah, but that's a positive thing that happened. I think on Wednesday. Of course, we record on Tuesdays, and then the podcast comes out Wednesday morning normally, and then Wednesday afternoon is usually when any big news drops. So I guess if I'm going to thank Eric Pohlkamp for anything, it's obviously going to be a fantastic freshman season. He was a big part in the McNaughton Cup run. And then thank you for doing it before we record our podcast.
So you say that, and then the moment we drop this, he's going to commit to a new school, and then it's going to be like, dang it.
Wait a minute, I'm coming back. And it's, what the? What? No, yeah. So it just, yeah. But that's a more positive, player leaving early. You want to see players go pro, especially before their senior year. Like that's more of a real thing. Will Zmolik signed last season with Philadelphia, their AHL affiliate, and you wonder how much of an opportunity he's going to get. I know Jerry Fitzgerald signed with the Iowa Wild as well after he left, but those were seniors. Their career was over anyways. This guy's leaving early, so you got to figure he's going to get a good chance to make an NHL roster at some point.
Right.
Not that the other two, Jerry, I don't think he ever saw a Minnesota Wild game, and Will is still playing, so he still very well could eventually maybe crack Philadelphia's lineup, but we'll see. But this is very good for the program. And we'll see what happens now with any hopeful boost in recruiting, and it makes you a little bit more of a legitimate school at least. So that's a little bit of a positive thing.
Right. It's the bittersweet aspect that you talk about, where you obviously want him to take that opportunity, and it helps your program long term. It just doesn't help your program short term. The White Cloud signing back in 2018, 2019, it wasn't necessarily a big boon for the program at the time, but what it did provide was, a guy like Roed to kind of, or a guy like some of these other players who see that you can get that pro contract, and it kind of helps the long-term vision. So that's, it's a short-term pain, long-term gain with losing Roed. And like you talked about, a great player, and go get yours, man.
61 points of production over the last 2 years that you got to replace, though. That's the where you said bittersweet, I think is the perfect way to describe it, where it's like, how do we replace?
We're happy for you, man, but why do you got to do this?
Yeah, and it's something that Beaver fans are kind of spoiled to, like fans of the Gophers in Michigan and North Dakota. Those teams are used to this. Logan Cooley comes in and says he's going to come back, and then he leaves after 1 year, and he's totally ready to play in the NHL. Maybe he's a bit skinny, but man, those teams are used to that type of thing. Beaver fans, not necessarily quite so used to it,
and it softens their blow because they get the prospects where it's like, okay, cool, we got the next one who's on his way in. And it's, Bemidji State doesn't get a guy like Pohlkamp or Roed that comes around very often and makes that big of a contribution. And it's fun to watch them, because at the end of the day, and we talk about all this, you just want to see a good product on the ice. You want to see a fun hockey team, and those guys help make it a fun hockey team. And while it's great to see him go, it stinks because we don't get to watch him anymore.
Right. Yeah. And I just like the minute I don't know for sure whether it was the first game that he played for BSU or whether it was the noticed him in, but Michigan Tech last year in Houghton, he steps on the ice and he is just like, who is this guy? Like, scored a goal, breakaway goal, nuts coming out party. And from that point on, you figured this guy was going to be pretty special. I think I gave him a shout out on the podcast that week, where I was just like, I don't know who this guy, where he came from, but he had a great weekend. So that is going to be a tough loss for Tom Serratori's got his work cut out for him. Like, this is
right.
When you're looking at future roster projections, let's say those three seniors on the forward lines don't come back next season. You've now lost your top 7 scorers from this season in Leighton Roed, Kyle Loft, Eric Martin, Eric Pohlkamp, Carter Jones, Jackson Judding, and Austin Joby. That is a tough ask to get production, from anywhere else. But I don't foresee none of those seniors coming back, so I don't think that will be the case. But if they don't, the Beavers did pick up one commit so far from the transfer portal, that being Carter Ranclev, from Niagara University. And he is originally a Minnesota boy. He's from Moorhead, Minnesota. I think he was a Mr. Hockey finalist when he was in high school. The Spuds there. And He was originally a UND recruit / commit, I think, and an Arizona State recruit. And then he tore his ACL and ended up at Niagara, and he led them in scoring last season. And now he's going to be a Beaver. He had 31 points. That's, for what it's worth, one more than Leighton Roed had. He had 11 goals and 20 assists. Leighton was a little bit more balanced with 14 goals, 16 assists. But that's a very good get for the Beavers, a very good get out of the portal. I didn't watch any Niagara hockey. I actually did. That's a lie. I watched like one period of them against Army before a Beaver game one because I was bored, and they're on Flow Hockey just like the Beavers are. So I think I watched like one period of them this season. But I've been told by sources that it is a really good get for the Beavers in the portal.
What conference is Niagara playing?
They're in Atlantic Hockey, so a smaller conference, just like
a CCHA East would be a good way to describe it, or probably better than because you're talking about the production he had this year better. Okay, because you're talking about the production from Roed, so it's like, he has that production that's good in a conference that's just as good, so it's easy to compare. Does that make sense? Just to kind of help some people who don't quite know the hockey landscape. So
yeah, very comparable conferences this year. RIT was the top team in the pairwise. They were 21. They had like better pairwise than the CCHA this year, but normally Atlantic Hockey is kind of the only one bid conference. Again, we talked about the CCHA had a terrible year and turned themselves into a one bid conference this year. But normally I think the CCHA has been on more of a ECAC level where you got the Quinnipiac and that's kind of Mankato's, and then you've got Cornell / Harvard some years where that's like Tech Bemidji in that 2-3 slot historically over the last like 6 years anyways. But this year, of course, those two conferences are much more comparable. So yeah, Carter Rancliffe coming in from Niagara, good forward, should be plenty of point production. We'll see where he fits in. I don't know anything about where he's going to fit in on these lines. Of course, it's going to depend a lot on what seniors come back and who stays. And if anybody else decides they want to dip out in the portal, it's going to be chaos. But point production coming in. Obviously, there's still work to be done. I think you want to maybe find a right shot defenseman in the portal if you can to kind of put and build that defensive room out. I know that you have good defensemen still on this roster, but I think you'd feel really good if you got at least one veteran guy from the portal in and were able to kind of fill that room. I think that would really help, losing Loft and Pohlkamp in the same year. But, I don't think that this is the end for like the Beavers. Like I said, we were talking about, man, Roed's coming back and Pohlkamp's coming back. Like, we've got all this offense returning, and maybe the only people we lose that made a huge impact are Loft and Carter Jones. Like, that'd be phenomenal, like, to get all these players back. We could probably win the conference again, maybe be better in pairwise. And now you've lost Leighton Roed, of course, positively to potentially the NHL. Pohlkamp's transferring out, and now it seems like the sky is falling, right? Because it's like, wow, that's 55-ish points of production from those two players this year, plus Kyle Loaf's 28. And Carter Jones was 5th in the team in scoring. So it's like, man, you're returning scorers. If Martin comes back, what the heck is going to happen? But we were kind of in the same spot last year. Of course, Leighton Roed was coming back. But Elias Rosen and Will Zmolik, that was the main thing. We're like, where are we going to get this defensive production from? Because that was what we relied on so heavily the year before, was those two to get us points. Like last season, 2 seasons ago, whatever you want to call it at this point, since the Beavers season is technically over, we only had 4 players over 20 points. This season we had 6. And a lot more people, like there was a lot more goals scored. It's kind of a different team. This team was a lot more offensive, but I think that's not like by design. I think it's just because they were a lot better offensively. It's not that they necessarily tried to play more offensively. They just were better at scoring goals. I don't think it was a huge, all of a sudden in his 27th year or whatever it is, Tom Serratori just decided, hey, let's change our mindset and all of a sudden play Big Ten style hockey. I think it was just the team was better at scoring goals. For all that we, wanted more defensive production. We're like, oh my God, Rosen and Smolik are leaving. How are we going to get defensive production offensively? Rosen and Smolik scored 49 combined points last season. Guess how many points Loft and Pohlkamp combined for this season?
I'm going to guess like around that same number.
52. So they
Wow.
outproduced them. Like a guy like Kyle Loft coming in, and I'll touch on all these numbers later because we had a lot of guys step up in big ways this year. But like, it's possible to recreate that. Like, you don't really see where it's going to come from on the roster right now. Like, we don't have an Eric Pohlkamp coming in that we can, like, even for us being excited about Pohl. I didn't expect this in his freshman season. I didn't expect this type of production offensively. And so it's kind of hard to see where it's going to come from. But if you look at the trends this year, obviously this has to keep going this way. There is a ton of guys that did not provide you with anything or little to nothing the year before offensively that took massive jumps this season. Kyle Loaf scored 8 points 2 years ago. This last season, 28. Vince Corcoran on the defensive side of the puck was a freshman, scored 3 points. Now he scored 11 this last year. Austin Jopi, who I believe missed last season injured, didn't score at all in his one game that he played. Got 19 points for you, was your 7th leading scorer. Jackson Judding went from 12 points to 22. Kirkland Irie in his freshman to sophomore jump, 4 to 15. Mitch Wolf got 0 points in 27 games as a freshman. He had 13 this year on the defensive side. That's a guy that could take a massive jump and did in the second half of this season. We've talked about Mitch Wolf tons on this show. Adam Flamang, again, another freshman taking his leap to his sophomore year, 6 points to 19. And then honorable mention, Dante Lawson, who didn't really have any points until the second half of this year, but he didn't score at all in 10 games last season. And now he's a critical part of that fourth line, and he got 7 points down the stretch of the season. There's so much points just coming up out of nowhere. And even your freshman class, even though you didn't have a Leighton Roed in terms of forward production, Magnuson, Chiddington, and McLean all outproduced Irie and Flamang from last season. Obviously, there's different forward room. It's not really comparable, but I think this is a very deep freshman class, and I think we have enough decent players coming in, especially with the Radcliffe transfer. I think that we're still in a good spot. I don't think that any team in this conference is like terrifying me right now. Michigan Tech has had a couple people enter the transfer portal. Ryland Mosley is on his way out. I think that the Beavers are going to be just fine. At the very worst, you're looking at a situation like this year where the conference is down again, and you still got to win the conference to get into the tournament.
Somebody's got to win it, and you just hope that you're the team that's just most organized to be
right.
able to do that.
I feel better even after losing guys like Leighton Roed and Eric Pohlkamp about the Beavers prospects going into next season, because last season we lost Ross Armour, Mitchell Martin, and we're like, where's the production going to come from? Eric Martin, by the way, I forgot to mention him. 13 points 2 years ago to 26, doubled his point production. He was phenomenal this year. And that's a guy like Leighton, like Kyle Loft. I hate to say it. It's like Kyle Loft announces that he's coming back for his 5th year. And it's like, cool. I guess we just, won't be losing 3 senior defensemen. That feels good to at least have some depth in that room. But nobody expected 28 points out of Kyle Loaf. That shatters, he over doubled, maybe tripled his career point totals at BSU this year. So it could happen. It could come from anywhere. And I wanted to bring all that out there, put it in the open, just to say hey, let's calm down, because I think that this team is still going to be just fine. Carter Jones 20 points to 24. I just keep finding these people that improved by 10 points or more. I think this team is going to be just fine. And then I guess the only other thing, I don't know if we've talked about it, Liam Engstrom, I don't believe is on the team. I don't know if we've talked about that on the show yet.
I don't know if we have. Yeah, go for it. Refresh us.
Right, because he was playing for the team as late as Northern Michigan, I believe, was his last game, because he was one of those fourth liners that would get rotated out for Lawson and Chiddington with McLean there. And then they started sticking with Lawson and Chiddington on the fourth line. And I think it was Lucas who brought it up after the McNaughton Cup celebration, that he didn't see Engstrom on the ice. He's like, do any of you see Engstrom on the ice? And I said, no, I don't. Now that you say it, I don't think so. And he's no longer listed on the team's official page for the roster. So we don't know what's going on with that. We're just you've got to assume that he's just not on the team anymore. I don't know that it's anything negative. Like from what I've been told, it's not like a huge scandal or anything, but it's
Just it might be a guy who just wanted to change the scenery.
Yeah. Right. And that, he was a talented player. He only had 5 points this year, but I mean, again, he only played 17 games. So as a freshman, that's like not terrible. He would have been a nice guy, especially with a guy like Roed leaving, to see if he could have ever turned into something more. But that is another guy, I guess, that we did technically lose this offseason.
Right. Yeah. And one last thing as we kind of wrap up this stuff. You mentioned some players leaving across the CCHA. Did Mankato, didn't they lose? Didn't they have somebody go into the portal today or like in recent days who was pretty big for them? I can't remember if I saw somebody mention that. Or if
Let
maybe
me double check. I'll plug Jared while we're at it. He's got a
we should plug
resource on Twitter, which I have quoted on the Beaver Banter website. And of course, I'm not like logged in to X on my naturally, so I'll go and pull it up on my phone. But yeah, Jared and the Pioneer have a great resource, CCHA only, so it weeds out all the stuff that you might not care about that's going on out east. Obviously, there's other things, other people in the portal that are leaving from other conferences, but yeah, Jared's got it on his Twitter page, his X page. It's his pinned tweet. CCHA and WCHA for the women's side as well, if you want to see that. So let me double check and see if there's any Mankato names on here. Michigan Tech, Ryland Mosley, Cash Rasmussen. Those are two big names that are probably going to affect Michigan Tech next year. Austin, we got to touch on Swank. I can't believe I forgot about that. Austin Swankler is back in the transfer portal. He played like 10 games.
What was your favorite Swankler memory this year?
How does a guy that impacts the team so little on the ice have so much headline, man? That's crazy. But yeah, he's no longer.
He wants a fresh start again.
Right. And he might not be in the conference, which would be a positive and a negative because it's fun to talk about him, but it's also like only his fun villain. It's like, yeah, he's a villain,
His villain arc might be coming to a close in the CCHA.
The only two listed for Minnesota State currently are Connor Grega and Tanner Edwards, who are both seniors. So nobody huge from Minnesota State in the portal as of right now. Unless this hasn't been updated, which Pohlkamp's already on here, and that was only a couple of hours ago. So you have to assume it's fairly updated. Jared's been doing a great job keeping up with that. So shout out to him. And again, that's on I'm sure it's on the Pioneer website and it's pinned on Jared's Twitter page, and I've quote tweeted it. So you'll see it if you're on Twitter, and if you're not, it's on the Bemidji Pioneer webpage, I'm sure.
Yeah. So Jared's a great resource for that. It's been awesome to be able to get to follow that. So go give that some love on social media for the resource there for the Pioneer. And also, apparently they're hiring. So if you want to work with Jared, submit your resume to the Bemidji Pioneer. So there you go. Ian's got his fired up. He's ready to roll.
Right on.
So is there anything, any other college hockey stuff, or do we wrap it up talking about the bracket?
I don't know that we have anything else that's like major. I guess if you're a Sillinger fan, Lucas Sillinger was just actually announced that he'll be returning to Arizona State for his 5th season. But that's old news. That's past. That's a past lover of Bemidji State's. So other than that, yeah, it's kind of just been the tournament going on. And I believe D. Henry right now is leading the bracket group. Of course, I don't believe the USCHO page has been working right now, at least not on my computer. So I can't verify that, but I'm pretty sure he said he was in the lead. So congrats to him, and we'll see if he can take it home in the Frozen Four. I know my pick is out, and I did kind of wish that I would have chickened out. I didn't pick Minnesota to go to the Frozen Four, I don't believe, because I didn't know if they'd get past that first game in Omaha. At least with Boston University, I was like, I feel really confident they'll get past RIT, and that means they only have to win one kind of iffy game. With Minnesota, I was like, they might not even make it past Omaha. And that's what I should have done with Michigan State as well, is like they played a much harder bracket than Boston College does. Maybe I should just pick Boston College to win it because I have less faith in Michigan State getting past their bracket. And they almost didn't get past Western Michigan, lost in overtime. North Dakota lost to Michigan, and Michigan beats Michigan State. Yeah, I could not be any less impressed with the Frozen Four this year. It is Denver, Boston College, Boston University, and Michigan. Um, in terms of
Ian
personal
is
rooting
seething
interest,
right
I
now.
have none, dude. I guess go BC because I think, have been without a title the longest. If not, it's maybe Michigan, but I couldn't care less how long Michigan goes without a title. So,
Rooting for East Coast hockey.
eh,
Wow.
is it better or worse than Denver though? Like Denver's won it like so recently. I'd rather just see somebody like not new, but like at least it's been out of
You
like
want
the
to move
national
the spotlight a
spotlight.
little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they've been removed from the spotlight for a little bit at least. So yeah, again, I don't truly care about that. The good thing that Boston College did was beat the tar out of Michigan Tech, at least late on in the game. They kind of pulled away.
Mhm.
Michigan Tech gave them all they could, but Boston College proved to be too much for the little puppies there from Houghton, and they had to run away with
You
their tails between their legs, and they did. They reverted to the goons that they really are. I'm not even going to hold back on them.
go
They
for it.
played some dirty hockey there at the end, man. I mean, they can say all they want. I don't know why they were so butthurt about like, oh, you guys were so quiet when who was it? Gabe Perreault, I think, elbowed. I can't remember who it was in the head from Michigan Tech, and it's like, yeah, he got a 5 in a game. It was the right call. I just didn't say anything about it. And
Right.
then when Michigan Tech leaves his feet later on in the game, yeah, I think that's a 5 in the game as well. And then Chase Pietla is trying to rip the helmet off of another Boston College player. It's like, dude, come on,
Come on. You can't be well, it's like in the North Dakota game too, wasn't it? Somebody tried to like at the very end of the
Jackson
game
Blake.
do a
Yep.
check and ends up hurting himself. Like, what are you guys doing?
Right. A little bit silly there from Jackson Blake trying to take out a Michigan player. At least hit him, if you're going to do that and injure yourself at the end of the game, at least take him with you. But
Don't oh man, it's
I
just
don't I don't
couldn't have happened to
condone
two better
acts of
programs
violence in
in
hockey.
UND
Yeah,
and Michigan Tech. So
yeah, really. But yeah, Michigan Tech. It was also almost the funniest goal against Blake Pietla I've ever seen. I mean, it was, but they ruled it off. I don't know if you saw this clip,
I did
CJ,
not.
but the I think it was Cutter Gauthier threw the puck in. It's just kind of trying to dump it in, get a line change. Ended up going off of the ref's butt cheek and into the net. I think it
I
was
did see that.
retweeted.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, yeah. I think the only page that I ever saw it on was like maybe 10K takes on Twitter. So if anybody's curious, I think they retweeted it or quoted it or something.
Yeah, I think they're the ones with the video.
Yeah. And of course, Pietla is coming out of the net to play the puck because he thinks it's just going to get dumped around the boards. And then the ref trying to get out of the way, it just goes right off of his rear end and into the net. And I'm like, count it, count the goal. Yes. Ultimate humiliation of Blake Pietla. You should have not come back for your 5th year. But
How
they
did he give up
disallowed
a
the
goal
goal,
in
which
his
is
final
probably
career
fair.
game off the ref's dumpy? That's where it went.
Right. Yeah. So it just a fun time watching Michigan Tech get beat. And, there's a lot to be said. Oh, you should want the Huskies to win because that means your conference is good because you're winning tournament games. It's like,
nobody was going to respect the CCHA if they would have won.
yeah,
I'm sorry. That's not going to change.
They would
That's
have,
not going to
they
change
got
this year's
lucky.
perception.
It's one game. They can beat them in one game. It wouldn't have given us that much more national respect if the teams. College hockey is really weird like that. And honestly, most college sports are because you want your teams in your conference to do good in out of conference games, especially in college hockey with the pairwise, where it's like, man, you saw what happened this year. Like, even if the Beavers would have done good out of conference, it wouldn't have mattered because the teams in your conference are so bad in pairwise that you lose one game to Ferris State this year. It's
You're
too
done.
much to come back from and make like an at-large bid unless you have this crazy resume out of conference. So yeah, you got to cheer for the teams out of conference, but once it comes to tournament time, I'd rather not see Michigan Tech. It's so much funnier to say, hey, you guys haven't won a tournament game in 43 years,
That's
and at least
embarrassing.
hang that over their heads. So yeah, I'm a little salty. So be it. My team didn't make it, and I'm sure they'd be doing the same thing, rightfully so, if we got blown out by BC too. But hey,
But
shoes
we're
on the
not
other
in that
foot.
spot.
You guys got the Mason Cup. We get to make fun of you for getting dog walked.
Yeah. Pun intended on that one, Ian?
Pun intended, absolutely.
Pun intended. Okay. All right. Any other college hockey things that we need to wrap up on? I think we're pretty much done. Do we talk about Sarah Torrey getting the Coach of the Year? We've already mentioned that.
I don't know.
I can't remember if we did. If it did happen last week.
Yeah, if we didn't, Tom Serratori was named CCHA Coach of the Year, and I know that he's up for National Coach of the Year as well. I don't know if he'll win that one or not. I would assume probably not. But it's nice that he's in the running, and he's a semifinalist or whatever it is for that award. I think there was like maybe 8 or 10 names on the list that I saw earlier today.
Right.
But good for Serratori. If we didn't touch on that, he won CCHA Coach of the Year. We might not have, because I think it would have come out on Wednesday.
It came out very late last week.
Yeah, we said he was a finalist, but I don't know that we ever talked about him actually winning it. So yeah, congrats to Coach Serratori. Very well.
And by the way, Pohlkamp got a nice award
dude,
as well.
What the excuse my French, what the heck was that, dude? Like immediately after, it's like they were waiting for him to announce.
I think it was just a scheduled tweet, and it just was very. I think it was a scheduled tweet, and the timing was just very bad.
It's insulting.
So there's a graphic with some awards, and Pohlkamp was on it, and it just came out like
it was like March Defenseman of the Month or something like that, or maybe it was Rookie. I don't remember.
Right, and it came out within 2 hours of him being in the portal, and it's like,
dude, within like 10 minutes. Not even kidding. Like it was crazy timing. It's like, wow.
It's somebody at the CCHA office was like, good, hit tweet.
Good, yes. Very good.
Just look at those Beavers fans. Look at those Snow Shark fans. They're so down. Let's rub a little more salt in that wound now.
Absolutely.
It was just unfortunate timing, but you know what? Doesn't make me feel any better. So that's, I think, pretty much it for college hockey. Let's wrap things up quick, kind of just going around the NSIC with a couple different stuff. I think it's worth mentioning that Mankato won the men's and women's Division II basketball tournaments. As much as it pains me to say it, this is where we talk about the respect for the conference. I'm leaving with something, and it's not giving props to MSU. You do not, in fact, gotta hand it to them this. You do not, in fact, gotta hand it to them. But the NSIC once again gets credit. And I think sometimes we take this for granted because we only play really the NSIC. We don't have that 30,000 foot view. Mankato won in men's basketball the NCAA tournament. They're national champions. And Bemidji State came close to beating them 2 different times. Right. And I think, which shows you again the frustration of this season, how things kind of fell apart, because they were a very talented basketball team. And it goes to show you the respect that the NSIC should get nationally if people don't, because in volleyball, they're the best volleyball conference in the country. In men's and women's basketball, they just took home national titles. And when you look at baseball with some of the other schools in the southern part of the conference, they're nationally respected as well. The NSIC is a very good conference. And I think sometimes just because we don't get out of the conference very often, and if we do, we have no idea how good any of these teams are or who they are. The NSIC is a dang good conference, and I think that we just, as Beaver fans, need to recognize that.
Absolutely. Yeah, men's and women's, I mean, that's crazy. I think the women's team was a 7 seed in their region. Like, unbelievable.
An insanity run. We're not handing it to them.
Hats
we just
on
have to
them. I'm going to keep my hat on, but I'll mention it. Yeah.
I'll mention it. One other thing too, Augustana's men's basketball coach, his name escapes me, but he left to take over Emporia State. Yeah. Of course, we know a little bit about him because despite the fact that I can't remember his name, we know, remember last year on the podcast, we had Marcus Osmus, friend of Jared Robato, the Pioneer, college friend. And he was a former basketball player at Augustana, was Marcus. And he talked about him being a coach with a baseball background more than a basketball background, yet coaching a team that won 10 years ago, now 9 years ago, the NCAA Division II title. So a really good coach in Augustana is leaving. And I don't know why that happened, but it did. So there's a little bit of a shakeup and kind of the news in that. So there you go. That's our recap with that. Let's catch up on some things. I think the softball team is in the middle of a game, or it's their home opener maybe it was yesterday or
Today.
Today. It's their home opener for softball. They could not quite get it on the softball field. They had to play it at the Chet. I don't have the score pulled up in front of me right now, Ian. Not that it matters because whoever's listening, the game's probably done, but are they still in the middle of a game?
They are playing. Well, actually, now that I apologize. Oh my God. I'm trying to pull up the game, right? That's what that freaking noise was for anybody that recognizes.
You're not hitting the live stats button?
No, I accidentally hit watch instead of like live stats. But it's 7-4, top of the 8th. So the game might be over. And the Beavers would have gotten swept now by Minnesota Duluth today. They played at 2 and lost 7-0, and now 7-4 loss, it looks like, to the Bulldogs. So that's 6 straight losses. Some of them close.
Not ideal.
The last couple have been really close with Concordia, St. Paul, and Sioux Falls on the last Friday, but not able to get any true momentum since that first conference sweep of the year against Southwest Minnesota State. So hopefully they can turn it around here soon, because once the softball season really starts getting down to the meat and potatoes, it's fast and loose, and you got to start picking up some wins here if you want to get back to that NSIC tournament.
Well, like, we forget because they start in February. So like they're most of the way through their season. Like the regular season ends in 26 days, which is crazy. The NSIC, like you said, it's a grind. It's the meat and potatoes. It happens fast. It's a lot of double headers. It's a lot of traveling. Beavers are going to go on Saturday down to Mankato to play Minnesota State. Then on Sunday, they're going to go to Winona and play Winona State, have a Wednesday series with St. Cloud State. Next week, next Saturday, they're going to be hosting Augustana. They have a nice little homestand coming up. And then after that, it's pretty much it. They have 2 more homestands after this, which goes to show you just how fast the college softball season goes, especially for teams up north. But that's where things sit with the softball team. They just haven't quite gotten on that track, and we'll have to kind of figure out how things progress. Ian, once again on our we move from softball once again to our baseball mentions. Anything real exciting we want to mention with the baseball team?
They only lost by 2 in their last game, which would have been Saturday against Southwest Minnesota State. But before that, the losses were not so friendly or forgiving. They haven't won since March 2nd. So literally
a calendar month.
A whole calendar month. And as you're listening to this, it will probably be less or over a calendar month. It's another season, of baseball for them. That's really all there is to say. 1-25 now to start the season, 0-16 in conference, 15 straight losses. It's more of the same for BSU baseball. You don't want to harp on them too much because that's just kind of how it goes. But hopefully they can find some momentum here and maybe pick up a game or two, like they did last season. I think at the end they got a win or 2, maybe just 1 towards the end of the season to at least give you something to say positively about the team. But we'll see. They play Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. They have 4 games against Sioux Falls this weekend. That's where they currently sit.
Yeah, that's where things look, and we'll have to see. Sioux Falls, they're going down to South Dakota for those ones. Their first home game at Bemidji State will be on Wednesday, April 10th. So a week from Wednesday. At least they have that, and they have a nice little homestand going on. Then they travel to Crookston, so not too far of a road trip, but that's where things sit for the baseball team. Ian, anything else as we wrap up the podcast? Anything else we need to mention?
I don't think so. Tennis, I don't think has played a match since we last spoke. They have a couple coming up here this weekend against Winona State and Minnesota State. But yeah, nothing really going on. I don't believe golf did anything unless I
can't remember. Did they have their conference? No, they didn't. I don't think they had their conference stuff yet. So
no.
Yeah, everybody's kind of in a lull.
Ooh, actually, men's golf is. Yeah, last week, Tuesday, they were wrapping up. We didn't have results yet, but they finished 12th out of 15 in the NSIC preview. The men's team did. And now they're currently in a showdown at Shangri-La in Monkey Island, Oklahoma.
Monkey Island, Oklahoma?
What
the heck is
That's
that?
What it says. And it's currently going on as we speak. They finished 12th of 16 yesterday. So we'll see if they can improve on that mark in today's action.
For women's golf, by the way, they have their conference, or they have the Sioux Falls, it's in Sioux Falls. It's what's called the Augustana Women's Invitational at Elmwood Golf Course. And that's
like their first action in a month. They haven't really done anything since the SMSU Spring Challenge. So
yep, it's that. And then next week they have the Wildcat Classic on the 15th of April in Wayne, Nebraska, and then it's on to the NSIC
2 weeks from now. This Augustana tournament's actually next
coming
week,
up on Monday.
Technically. Yeah, so next Monday.
Within the next 7 days of recording this. So
right,
there you go. Things are coming to a head late in the spring season, which is crazy because we're still wrapping up some of the winter sports stuff. So anyway, that's where we end things, and I think that's where we'll have to finish it on this one. This has been the Beaver Banter Podcast. We'll catch